life did that thing that it does, and my job in the library ended at the time that the teacher who was doing the music tech course decided to move on, and I found myself teaching music within the prison.
Hello and welcome to the Prelude podcast. In this episode you'll be hearing from Minnie Birch, a folk singer that teaches music technology within a male prison. Minnie is passionate about storytelling and music and their bonding roles within society. Minnie shares her perspective on being a female teacher in a male prison. She opens up about her experiences of helping to create as well as salvage family bonds with storytelling, and emphasises the importance of music to help rehabilitate offenders. So without further ado, this is Minnie's story.
I am Minnie. I grew up in Hertfordshire with my mum, my dad, my older sister and my younger brother, so a middle child in what was a pretty regular family, or at least all I've ever known. I went to a very tiny village school, and the one thing I remember most from my childhood is a very big love of stories, storybooks. My dad used to read to me and my sister most nights, and he has a little lisp, and I have very strong memories of just watching his lips when he was reading me stories. And then my mum would take us to Abbots Langley Library, little village library, to get our books, and that was a really big part of my childhood growing up, was stories and books, and was like my instant passion. Alongside that, we were quite a musical family. My granddad, who has many claims to fame, one of them is being town crier to the Queen, and he gave me like a ukulele when I was tiny. He gave all his grandchildren, of which he has, I lose count, but there's at least 15 of us. We all got a ukulele. He wanted us all to learn the ukulele. So yeah, music was a big part of growing up. I got my first guitar at 11, joined my first band at like 12, 13, and yeah, made terrible punk rock music. My sister, being a little bit older, had kind of introduced me to like the grunge scene. So yeah, that is the main things I remember of my childhood are stories, storytelling, trip to the libraries, and then joining terrible punk bands as I got older. Music is storytelling, I think, a lot of the time. So I love like folk and fairy tale. I did my master's degree in children's literature, and my actual final paper was on Women in Grimm's fairy tales, which I laugh as I say that, because I just think, if you're fortunate and privileged enough, you can get away with spending a year studying. That was me. I was fortunate enough to spend a year reading fairy tales and calling it an academic pursuit. And music is similar. Like, a lot of the music I'm interested in is English, Irish, Scottish folk music. I have like a very weird niche interest in songs from the football terraces, so I'm very interested in that like oral tradition of passing on stories, and I fell into this in a really unusual way. Is just that I went through a big breakup, and I googled this thing about how to get over like a breakup, and it was like to try something new, and I started playing Sunday league football, having never played football before. Like, so as a fully grown up, I joined a football team, and I was terrible at football, but I discovered this whole community that embraced me and that I really enjoyed, and I started going to football games, and the musician in me, when I heard people singing on the terraces, was like, this is really cool, like this is folk music in its like most real context. And I then ended up taking that to the absolute extreme of making a whole record called You're Not Singing Anymore, based on songs that you hear on the football terraces. So that was a great project that I only just finished up earlier this year. And it was very niche, but I think sometimes a niche thing, it seems to have appealed to like a lot of people. And I think that is because football, in the same way that music can be, is a really big part of people's identity and sense of self. Like, people are very attached to a team, They support a team because it's where they're from or because it's who their dad supported. And I interviewed a lot of football fans as part of that project, and most people were tied to their teams through this sense of like self-identity. So that was quite interesting for me to discover that whole world. So an obvious career for me, it felt at the time, was to go into something in the book world, whether that was to be like a bookseller or children's book publisher. And I had these grand ideas that I'd work in London at like Random House or something. And I interned at every book publishing company you can think of in London. And Klaus Flug, actually, of Anderson Press, gave me the advice that if I wanted to get into the publishing world, I should work in a library. So I got a Saturday job in a library, because I was still studying at this point. It was at Rickmansworth Library. And I never looked back. I had started to realise that children's book publishing was a lot of networking, a lot of sales, and not things that lent to my talents, but libraries were about sharing a love of stories, setting up book groups, things that worked really well for me and that I enjoyed and I loved. And I did that, fell into that, became a children's librarian. I won some awards and did loads of wonderful things as a children's librarian. And when I was 21, I approached our local prison because I'd heard about this amazing project called Storybook Dads, which was about using stories to keep imprisoned parents in touch with their children. They're a national charity called Storybook Dads who still do wonderful work. And I approached my local prison and said, I'd love to work on this. I'm a children's librarian and can I come and volunteer and be involved? And the librarian there at the time, Sue, she said, we don't have a Storybook Dads project here. I don't have the time to do it, but if you want to set one up, you'd be very welcome to. And 21-year-old me just thought, I can do that. I've never been in a prison before. I've never set up a project before, but I'm sure this will be fine. And together we set up this project. So I began volunteering once a week in like a male prison. And I remember the first time I went in, I thought that nothing in life ever tends to fit the stereotype of what you think. So it's not going to be like it is on the telly or in the movies. And I remember it was a really sunny day the first time I visited the prison, and I was being shown around by Sue, and we walked into the prison grounds and there were just two topless, very, very muscly men doing press-ups in the yard. And I was like, oh, maybe it is going to be just like the movies. Just going to be tattooed, giant, terrifying men. But I quickly learned that it was a very diverse place full of characters that were there for all different reasons. Storybook Dads is a really important project. It did feel like a big honour to be a part of it. So how it would work is guys would have to, dads, or it could be granddads or uncles or older brothers, just somebody that wanted to keep that family contact by sending home an audio story. So we would record them very crudely on a like handheld Zoom thing and then just get those sent off to be edited up by the main charity to start with. We eventually built our own like little editing suite on the site, but that's how it started. And it was a really emotional thing to be part of. I remember like early on making what might have been like little mistakes with hindsight, because I remember like we'd choose the story with the guys that they wanted to do, and then you'd sit with them while they were reading, because sometimes people would maybe need a bit of help with some of the words or just with the recording process, or because you're just in that environment of prison and prisoners aren't left alone to do their own things. It is that restrictive space and they have to share this very private moment of reading a story. And I remember saying to one guy early on, like, oh, how old is your little boy? And he said, oh, he's 4. And I said, oh, what kind of things is he into? And this guy just burst into tears and he said, I don't know, I wouldn't know, I've not been there. And I was like, oh, it was those realizations that actually that thing that I felt of like I would hate to have lost that from my dad. You're like, gosh, some of these people it's not just that you're sending this for the kids and it'll be so nice for the kids to hear their voice and have that connection. This means so much to the dads. And I remember one guy saying like it was the first thing he'd done in prison that he could feel proud of, that he'd read his kid a bedtime story. And there were just so many over the years, really nice stories. I remember the first time we recorded for a baby in utero. I remember reading an article about how, babies can hear from about 7 months. And from then on, I was like saying to guys, I was putting it on my posters, if you're in this situation, like baby can hear your voice, like, mum can put the headphones to the belly. And I remember us making a lot of like nursery rhyme stories, and you just in this, it's a real privileged position. You are in a situation with somebody who might be doing a really, really long sentence for a really challenging crimes. You might have somebody who's doing a life sentence for murder, but you're the person that's convinced them it would be a really good idea to sing Incy Wincy Spider. And it's bizarre, but it is also like, it's funny and it's emotional, and it is the hardest thing, hopefully, that person will ever have to go through, is being separated from their family in that way, but facing a prison sentence. And you kind of get to just be that little ray of light, which sounds very egotistical, but it's quite a nice thing to be that for somebody else, just to be that person that they spoke to that wasn't a uniform or didn't need anything from them, that had just come along to say, let's read some stories to your kids. It was a pleasure and an honour to do the project, really. The lady who set it up, Sharon, who set up Storybook Dads nationally, literally just had the idea and started it from scratch, and now it runs in like over 90 plus prisons, I think, and it's a wonderful project. It's so simple, but that bedtime story is a really important part of parenting. It's a really nice thing to be able to give to people. My favourite bit of feedback that we ever had from a family that had received a CD from their dad reading them a story was a little girl who wrote us a letter to say that she'd loved getting the story from her dad, and they put like a little message as well, the dads, with the story, so they'll kind of say like, I hope you're doing well at school, or they'll explain something about their life. And she had just said, I'm glad to hear that you're eating more than gruel. And it was the first time that I'd realised, like, that's funny. But I had those preconceptions that I've talked about of walking into a prison and like, oh gosh, is it just going to be a load of terrifying, muscle-clad, tattooed, angry men. For a child, they have them too. And for her, that was a real worry. That was a real part of her anxiety, that he would have slop and gruel every day. And you could tell it just brought her so much comfort to hear her dad saying, and just so you know, I had a nice tea. And it was just really lovely feedback, because it firstly was just lovely and innocent, but it switched my brain to that thing of, this is a really anxious thing for children, and we should do what we can within this project to kind of ease their anxieties, because there are things within prison that are positive for the dads that they can talk about. So some of them might work in the grounds tending to the flowers, or some of them might be taking a class, or some of them might go to book group. And the more they can tell their children about those things, the better, because they're not lies, they are truth. They might say, I played chess with my friend, and that's true, and that's something that is quite like real for children. So that was really nice. Yeah, the feedback from the families made it just so lovely, and I think it meant a lot to the mums at home, if they were, still in a relationship, or even to the parents of the prisoner, just to hear their voice when you want to, not on a hurried phone call. And we have sadly as well had times when those recordings that we've made have been then the only thing that they've got of their dad when he's passed away. So we've had those moments as well when someone's contacted us to say, like, after their dad had passed away, they've still got this story, and somebody said that they'd played it at their dad's funeral, which it's quite nice to know that you can have those recordings. That's something they can keep forever and ever. Storybook Dads is amazing in the kind of connections that it makes for people. I mean, I can sort of sit here and tell these little stories, but there's research behind it. I mean, you're 6 times less likely to reoffend after leaving prison if you maintain those family contacts. And if you engage in a project like Storybook Dads, that is maintaining that family contact, because it's about finding normal moments. And what is more normal than a bedtime story? Because it's hard. There's very little privacy in prison. There's very little time to just use a phone. There's a lot of stuff that you and maybe your partner, even if it's your ex-partner, have to be talking about. And children are funny. They're busy little things as well. Like, I would have dad saying to me, like, I find it really hard to talk to her on the phone. And I think if you've ever tried to ask a child under about the age of 8 what they did at school today on the telephone, you'll know their pain. And they are still children, even though they're in this unique situation of having their parent taken from them, usually at completely short notice, with no knowledge to them that was going to happen. Some of them have really, really positive relationships, and they've just lost their parent just like that, in a way that can't really be explained or isn't really that easy to talk about at school. Or and that was a nice thing, that we've had some children that say they take their CDs to show and tell, and the other children have been really jealous of them. But yeah, I think projects like that can save families, because it is very hard work to stay together in that kind of scenario. I mean, I do feel that for me it seems so obvious, that bedtime story thing, and I think that is my dad's fault for reading me. Like, I remember him, really clearly remember him reading me George's Marvellous Medicine. I've got such a strong memory of that book in particular. But it's doing that project within the prison made me realise that isn't everyone's reality, and it was also quite a new idea, and you had to say to some guys, no, like, the kids will really enjoy this. And I would say, does anyone ever read to you when you were younger? And that isn't something that they had. And I kind of had to like wake up to that realisation that, like, oh, this was a really privileged thing that my dad did for me. Not everybody has this. I just grew up thinking my dad reading to me before I go to bed is just as given as the sun rising in the morning. So you learn a lot about yourself in these scenarios, I think, and how lucky you've had it. And then that passion that I spoke of for music was still going on in the background. Music as a career wasn't really something that was ever just discussed or on the table. So I'd gone for this sensible library job, but I'd always kept this passion. And there is a studio in the prison. So, of course, I found my way to it and started seeing what was going on there. So they ran this whole music tech course, and I started to volunteer there as well and just poke my head in. And then life did that thing that it does, and my job in the library ended at the time that the teacher who was doing the music tech course decided to move on, and I found myself teaching music within the prison. So I guess that's like a short, hurried version of how I found myself with a dream job in the most unlikely of places. But it really is a dream job. I think we talk a lot about women in tech generally, and it's something like 2% of music producers are female or non-male. So firstly, I get to be part of a very small percentage of people, but then to do it in that environment, I think, is very interesting, because it's an entirely male-dominated environment. And there definitely are some people who come into the music class and you can tell they're very confused that you're the teacher, or they kind of confused when I know stuff, and I think, why would I be here teaching you if I didn't know the stuff? So when I then became the music technology teacher, that was quite different. Like, a lot of my roles within the prison environment before had been voluntary. And generally speaking, people are absolutely over the moon to see you. The residents are really supportive of everything that you're trying to achieve, and they're grateful, and they'll say thank you to you. And when you switch to being more like an authority figure, that changes like the dynamic of your relationship. As a volunteer running Storybook Dads, even though I was kind of organising the whole project, I didn't really have any power or authority. So I think when that switches, that's quite challenging. Like, a lot of the guys that come into the education department have had rubbish experiences of education, haven't completed education, have only done education up to maybe 12, 13, haven't done it as a teenager or in their adult life. And it took me a while to kind of realise, like, you aren't a safe space for them, which is quite a strange shift. I'd spent most of my time volunteering in prisons, and I never had negative experiences, but essentially you have all your training about what to do if things go wrong or if people become challenging. Like, at the end of the day, it's a volatile environment, and you need to safeguard yourself in that. And I'd always just been like, oh yes, I am the potential person that is unsafe in this environment. And then when I became a teacher, I quickly realised, like, oh, I represent a lot of really unsafe things for people. Like, I am not a safe, welcoming space. And I had to work really hard on that and put away some of the feelings I have around being liked instantly by people, that wasn't something that was going to be a given, that actually that was something I might have to work quite hard to earn. And that was quite a big learning curve. And that people were going to be in that room with me who didn't want to be, which of course never happened if you were coming to Storybook Dads or you were coming to book group. These were things you put your name down to attend. Whereas the music class, generally speaking, people want to be in that space, but people have to do some kind of activity. So it could be that this is the best of a bad bunch from their point of view, or it could be that they wanted to do it but just not particularly at 8:15 every morning, having, got other things to deal with. So yeah, there was just like a slight like dynamic switch of, okay, I need to win people over. I feel that it was quite sad to realise that maybe I wasn't going to be this, and this sounds terrible, but it's just honest and something that I've come to analyse in myself only just of late, really, that I wasn't necessarily going to be people's saviour, people's like ray of sunshine to brighten up their day. But on reflection, perhaps that's a good thing, to realise that that's not your place necessarily. And this isn't about positioning you and your ego. This is about these people that are in this really difficult situation, and these learners who haven't had all these opportunities that you have, and you're that vehicle to bring this to them. And with music, that is just such a nice thing. It's kind of twofold. There'll either be people that have just never had these opportunities that you've had, and you can bring that to them, or there's people for whom music has been a massive part of their life and they just haven't been able to do it in this environment. There is, on every kind of cohort of learners, on every course we have, there's at least one resident who is much better qualified than I am to run the course. And that's something that at first really intimidated me and I found quite challenging. So if you were in a higher education college, people wouldn't sign up for a course if they didn't need that. But if you're in a prison environment, if music has been your life and your passion, then you'll put your name down for that course because it's the closest you're going to get to your real life. So yeah, there's, as I say, almost one gentleman on every course that knows more than I do. But I think if you stop worrying about that and lean into it, it just becomes a collaborative, safe space for everyone, which has been like a pleasure, really. I learned so much from the guys who essentially know more than me, who are willing to actually teach me about the software or the nature of the kind of music that they make. Because a lot of the time it's a very different genre, and I've learned an awful lot about like the UK grime and rap scene, things that I wouldn't know about. And although there is like a myriad of different genres and tastes in that classroom, that is certainly something that I have been introduced to. But I think the main thing is that I guess like there's a lot of like young guys that join the group, the music group, sort of young guys with gang related backgrounds, and music for them is going to be their way out of their challenging situation, and they are really invested in it. And what I've mostly learnt from them is they deal with themselves in the opposite way to how I deal with myself. So as a woman, I will apologise for the space I take up, or be lacking in confidence, if I'm feeling uncertain, I will question myself and apologize. Whereas if they're feeling uncertain, they will do anything but that. Like, it is just pure confidence will get me through this, pure bravado will get me through this, and I'm going to tell you that I'm the best, because that's how I'm going to convince myself that I'm the best. And that is like an attitude that I find time and time again with a lot of the young men, that they really are in a situation where nobody else believes in them, so that is their only option. And I would say, of all the things they've taught me about the technicalities of creating beats or anything like that, just to absolutely believe in yourself is what they've mostly given me, because they don't always really believe it themselves underneath, and they have their wobbles, but that is how they tackle it. They're just like, no, this is what I'm going to do. There is like no other option. I'm going to become the next big thing. And they almost are manifesting that in how they act and who they are. So from the point of view of my own music, I'd been doing that from a really young age, writing my own songs, joining my own bands, and in the background of working, I had been doing almost like a full-time musician job at the same time. So I had been releasing records. I was fortunate enough to tour all over the place, all over the continent, America, Iceland, had loads of lovely opportunities. I had a lot of friends within my kind of like music world that were doing music full-time, and obviously music is challenging in the sense that it's not always like a stable income for people. But I think I had just fallen so in love with the work that I was doing in the prison, it didn't entirely cross my mind ever to just pack up my things and leave and take my guitar. So I used to just take all of my annual leave would be to go touring. All of my recording would be done outside of work, and just kept the two side by side. And I think that there's like a hustle there that perhaps I can relate to with my students in the classroom, that are like, regardless of all these things that are happening around them, music is their focus. It's like their saviour. It's where they put themselves. I think prison is probably a very nice place for observing characters and writing stories, which is what songwriters do. So I've probably woven a lot of those experiences and the people I've met into songs along the way. Working as a music tech teacher has definitely made me realise that I know a lot more than I think I know. And I think it's been very easy within a kind of male-dominated industry to always assume or second guess yourself a lot and not have the confidence in your own ability or your own knowledge around things. And as the teacher in that environment, you are the one teaching people, you are the one showing people. So as much as there will be people who come along who know a lot more than me, there's also a whole range of students who don't know anything, and I'm there to teach them, and I'm their conduit to this thing. And that's really nice to realise and to have that faith in yourself. I don't think it's until you start showing or teaching other people that you realise you know something, or that you have knowledge that is of value. I think as a musician it's quite easy to just think, oh, everybody knows this, but they don't, and it's nice to realise that. And when you spend it's 4 days of the week that I teach there, and when you spend 4 days with people who are in challenging situations, but essentially it is their bravado and their sense of self, because a lot of the time that's all you've got left when you've been stripped of the rest of your identity, which is the clothes you would wear, the place you would live, the friends you would be with, the places you would go to, the food you would choose to eat. Like, a lot of the students have a very strong sense of self, and I do think being around them, that has really rubbed off on me. We talk a lot about all the things that we as like music teachers give to the prisoners, and they're all things that I'm super proud of, which is that they can use their music to express themselves, and they can work together as a team, they can work to a deadline, they can learn about other cultures and get empathy for other people through music, and it's just so good for their mental health and their well-being. Like, for a moment you're not in a prison, you're in a music studio. That is what our classroom feels like. It is a proper studio. People cut good records there. You're a musician, you're a rapper, you're a producer for that time that we're there. And that's a really nice thing. But I think we talk a bit less about that flip side of how much we get from them. And I have that thing of like, there's a couple of guys in my head who I think, what would Mr. So-and-so do in this scenario? And that's a nice thing to have taken away from them, that like, you have to have faith in yourself or nobody else will. And I've, as I said, been in that environment in different roles, but from the age of 21 to 37. So I've been going into that prison at my lowest ebb of when I'd been through breakups, or from moving out of my parents' house to getting my own place, and all those big life things. I've been there, and some of those people have been there for the majority of that time too, that are serving quite long sentences. And although you have like a very professional relationship, as you can imagine, within that environment, there's quite a lot of boundaries, but they're a big part of shaping who you are. And I think I've taken a lot of from them, that is like, you've got to believe in yourself, because nobody else is going to have your back at the end of the day. And yeah, that's a nice thing to have taken, and just their value that they have for life. I think this year has made me realise how many people have said things about the lockdown scenario that we've been in, the things that they miss. And I'm like, this is really similar to prison though, like when we couldn't all get the exact food we wanted to start with, and we couldn't go to places or see the people we wanted to, and how much that impacted on our mental health. And that is what prison is, times 10. It's a really hard place to be. So when you're around people that don't just survive that, but turn it into something positive, that they want to make a difference to their life, that they can focus on that future that might not be coming for 2, 4, 8 years, it's quite an inspiring thing to be around. And if you're with somebody every day that's been through that, it makes you a bit more humble, I think, about your own sort of privilege. And one real treasure that somebody once said to me was a much older chap, and he was turning 80, and he doesn't look a day over 60, and we were all discussing this in our group, and I said to him, what is the secret then? What is the secret of this youth? And he said to me, you have to find someone you totally and utterly adore. And he was just talking about his wife, and that was his life advice to me. And I thought, what great advice to get from somebody serving a very long sentence at a much later time in their life, about their wife, who they, from conversations I've had with him, they have come to terms with perhaps never reuniting in that way while he's still alive. You know, they may never be together again. That was his advice. Find someone you totally and utterly adore, and it will keep you young. So I have definitely changed a lot since the person that stepped into that prison like nearly 17 years ago and now. And that's a natural thing. Obviously, there'll have been so many things that have shaped me. My main thing is understanding. I'm not the world's best listener, but I've definitely got better. And I think prison has given me that. And understanding that people are made up of their experiences, and that you can find common ground with everybody, which you really don't think you can, but it does have challenging people within that environment. Of course it does. And I think it's opened my mind to not write people off so quickly in a way that I definitely would have done before, if you only know one facet of a person. And that's something that I don't think I would have had as much if I hadn't been in that environment. I think I can be quite righteous and stubborn in my views, particularly political views, or views about what's right and wrong. And they've definitely been completely shook up and spun around a few times. I've got a lot of my own personal recordings. There's 3 records that are kind of a trilogy, and they're called Settled, Floundering and Tethered, and they're about kind of states of how I felt at particular times in my life. And it's quite interesting to look back on them. There's a prison, kind of obvious prison song in each one of them. It just was something that really impacted on my life. And in almost every song there is a reference to a fairy tale as well. So that history of having studied fairy tales and having that interest in folk tradition is all there, and all woven in the stories that I wanted to tell. And then there are other people's stories that I've met from that environment, so from life. But it is just, I think a lot of us have those stories of people who are at such a difficult point are the ones that resonate with us, aren't they? They're the ones that I guess either make us realise what we have got or what we could lose. So yeah, a lot of their stories wind their way into my songs. And then more recently, my last record was the football terrace songs, and that's been quite an interesting project. Actually, football isn't something that we talk about too much at work. It's very much considered that a football team could be a challenging thing. It's an allegiance that somebody might have that could kind of clash with somebody else. But when I have spoken about it with people, I come at it from this idea that it's like this oral tradition of telling stories, and that is 100% how a lot of UK rap sees itself. And I've had so many lovely conversations that have like opened my mind to how I feel about certain genres of music or certain lyrics, where it's art imitating life, and that is their folk music. So for a lot of like the rap music that's coming out of like London at the moment from the different areas, that is their folklore, that those are their stories, that is what's happening. And it's quite interesting to look at it in that way and realise that music that's less controversial or less challenging wouldn't be real, and that the problem doesn't really lie in the content of the music. The problem lies in the issues within society that put people in these scenarios that I've never been in. So yeah, it's interesting how you throw different musicians together in that way. It's nice to work across genre, because I haven't had those opportunities outside of the prison walls. I just haven't met in my path or the venues that I play or the circles that I move. I don't meet that many people who make very different music to me. So I like to think that they have affected how my music sounds. So we're currently in this quite challenging situation within prisons. So I'm not sure how much people would be aware, but during the pandemic, most prisons went to like a 23-hour day lockdown. So most of the staff, like myself, would have been pulled out of prisons. We weren't delivering those services, and people were behind their door, as we call it, for 23 hours of the day. So only coming out to shower, have some exercise, make a phone call. There were no visits for months. So that's been really challenging, and prison governors and prison staff have worked really hard, and we're making headway now. So we're at least back on site, and the teachers are sending stuff to guys in their rooms. Made sure we've got a lot of keyboards out there for people to be playing on in their rooms and stuff. And there's loads of good projects happening, but we're always a little bit behind generally from society, like what we can actually achieve, if that makes sense. So within a pandemic, we still aren't back and up and running. So it's a difficult time for people and their kind of well-being. So at the moment, we're just doing the best to create exciting resources that people can do in their rooms, and they'll send them back and forth to me, and just really looking forward to getting students back into the studio and making music again, which is strange because it's alongside, obviously we're all facing challenges, but as with most people, you think, right, what's the best you can make of it. And I've probably had more time this year than ever to make my music and write my own original music and things like that. So I'm kind of at the opposite situation of those musicians that are in my classroom. My time working in prisons has definitely made me think that I wish I could hold on to that 21-year-old me that just didn't question anything and just signed up for a project like this. So if you can hold on to that person who just says yes to things, that's a really good thing to do. And just a saying that, like, you know, my grandma would use, or maybe you'll have heard, is that, you know, there but for the grace of God. I think prison gives you that in spades, that realization of these aren't different people to myself. They've just had completely different options, and that is quite a sobering thought. I think I walked into prison probably quite righteous and self-worthy and savoury, and then you very quickly realise you just had a lot more options.
Thank you for listening to Prelude. If you've enjoyed this episode, please support us by leaving a review, subscribing to the show and following us on social media. If you would like to contact us about this episode, please do send us a direct message via any of our social profiles, links to which you can find through visiting preludeaudio.com. We hope that you'll join us again soon for the next episode of the Prelude podcast.